Hello, I'm Bianca.
I'm Paloma.
And I'm Tom.
And you are listening to the Climate Press. A podcast where we aim to bring together climate science with public understanding and action.
Earlier this year, the NHS announced plans to become the first net zero health service in the world. Today, the Climate Press is venturing on a mission to understand what this declaration means in practice for our health services. We start by speaking with Alexis Percival, an environmental and sustainability lead in the NHS, about some of the challenges and momentum to begin this journey towards becoming net zero. We'll focus on a few key areas of achievable emission reductions in the healthcare system. We'll even look beyond the NHS and speak with Tim Keady, a Specialist Registrar in Anaesthesiology with the Health Service Executive in Ireland. But first, let's recap what we mean when we talk about net zero emissions.
Net zero greenhouse gas emissions refers to the overall balance between greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere and greenhouse gases actively removed from the atmosphere. To achieve net zero, greenhouse gas emissions must be reduced to zero where feasible, and any remaining greenhouse gas emissions must be balanced by active removal from the atmosphere through natural or technological processes that lead to negative emissions.
Thanks, Paloma. Now here's Alexis.
I'm the Environmental and Sustainability Manager for Yorkshire Ambulance Service. I've been in post for 10 years now. But my post is, I'm one person in an organisation of 6,300. And I'm in charge of driving forwards the sustainability agenda to get people understanding the impacts of climate change, but also to actually drive the sustainable change that needs to happen. So as an organisation, we have a carbon footprint of around 16,000 tonnes of Scope 1 and Scope 2, which is the direct emissions, the things that we can look at.
Okay. If you could even go into further the scope.
Yeah. So Scope 1, Scope 2 is looking at things we consume.
Okay.
So we're looking at electricity, gas, water, and then we're also looking at things like fuel. So all of our fleet, of which we've got 1,200 vehicles, patient transport, ambulances, we have rapid response vehicles. We also have all the support vehicles for people cleaning ambulance stations, cleaning ambulances, through to fleet workshops. So we've got a wide spectrum, and most of our carbon footprint is from our diesel consumption with Scope 1, Scope 2. So bear in mind, Scope 1, Scope 2 is 16,000 tonnes a year.
Okay.
And we can start to control that because we're moving over to renewables. We're getting more efficient boilers. We're looking at what we can do for building a zero-emission frontline ambulance with running on hydrogen and electric. So we'll end up moving towards a net zero target fairly rapidly. Mm-hmm. But Scope 3 is the kind of essential stuff that we need to use quite frequently.
Right.
And you can't necessarily control as much. So what we have is the stuff we procure. So procurement footprint would cover the products we use, face masks, plastic syringes, all the equipment we use in the back of an ambulance. It would also cover things like stretchers, but it also would cover things like anaesthetic gases.
Right.
Now, I've started on preliminaries on anaesthetic gases to have a look at how much we use. And N-NOx, which is nitrous oxide, is what we use for our anaesthetic gases, and there is no alternatives. Okay. In hospitals, they can move to desflurane and ceflurane and various other things. But our carbon emissions just from N-NOx is 23,000 tonnes a year. So 1.5 times the amount that we produce from all of our fleet, all of our estates. And we use a couple of thousand litres of Ventanox a year. You only use 5% of what you inhale and you exhale the rest of it. So it is atmospheric almost instantly.
Just to recap, nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. Its warming potential is 300 times that of carbon dioxide, and it remains in the atmosphere for up to 100 years. Nitrous oxide also contributes to the destruction of the stratospheric ozone. We'll come back to this and anesthetic gases later in the show when we're joined by Tim. Right now, let's hear about some of the bigger challenges of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our health services.
There's a lot of challenges that, as I said, about the carbon footprinting of the NHS. A lot of the procurement is probably about 70% of the challenge of the NHS. We can green our estates, we can green our fleets, but we consume on everything we do.
And do you think do you think procurement, kind of that, what did you call it, scope 3 earlier, is going to be one of the biggest challenges in terms of reaching?
Yes, absolutely.
And along in that same scope, does it also include waste as well? At what point does that come into our emissions and those calculations?
That's a scope 2 emission, so we can control that.
Okay.
But there's also the caveat that all organisations need to have zero waste to landfill, which that was supposed to be in this year. It does, however, shift it to waste recovery through heat. Okay. So it's not about waste minimisation. But there's a plastic reduction pledge that's out as well at the moment, which got launched at the back end of 2019 to encourage people to stop using single-use plastics in the NHS.
Okay.
Which, when we're using 8 billion gloves at the moment, which is, I'm sure, going to go up because of the coronavirus issues, it's the single-use plastic element is a real challenge through medical stuff, but single-use things like cups and plastic stirrers and non-necessary things like that, we can eliminate those now. There is no hygiene issues that are associated with those. Blood and liquids and things, you can't do anything but dispose of it. But if you don't have anywhere to dispose of it to, because we've run out of landfill space and quite a lot of our waste isn't incinerated, but it has to go into deep landfill. Okay. And there's a limited amount of deep landfill that's around. Mm-hmm. And you're never going to get away from a lot of the stuff that we have to dispose of. Mm-hmm. And some of it can be incinerated, but there's a national shortage of incinerators, and there's a national shortage of organisations to pick up your waste. And we've got a daily battle trying to get companies to come and pick up waste. But the healthcare sector is always going to generate it. So we just can't physically get away from that challenge. And then we just need to be a bit more inventive with it, I think.
Yeah. Are there spaces or ideas for solutions already coming down the pipe, or?
No.
Sadly not. No. Fair enough. Yeah.
The problem is we're battling with the likes of food companies who, if you've got like a toothpaste company that has toothpaste that's out of date, they don't want that toothpaste to go back onto the market, so they want it to go into deep landfill, and they pay more than the health system can. So we're with this backlog of waste until space becomes available. Okay. So we have a real challenge that is not going to go away.
You've talked a bit about the extent of emissions, and then kind of even your beginning process of trying to map out those emissions in different scopes and to see what's easier and what's more difficult to then control. Can you explain a bit about where the momentum from this work is coming from?
So there's been some really quite monumental changes in the system in the past year. So I got quite annoyed with the fact that the NHS wasn't changing fast enough. So I set up the NHS climate emergency around the same time that Extinction Rebellion was kicked off. And one of the kind of spin-offs and various things from the Extinction Rebellion was the Doctors for Extinction Rebellion started.
Right.
And we started increasing pressure between us all on the various heads of, because we can only change a certain amount within the healthcare system. It needs a push from the top down. So I can say, well, we're going to have a completely green ambulance service, and we're going to have all the vehicles electric or hydrogen, and we're going to have a net zero building and a passive house standard. But in reality, we don't have the budget for it.
Right.
And there's always some bureaucracy somewhere that will stop or hinder that challenge from moving on as fast as it should. So for the NHS climate emergency, I contacted all of the heads of different departments, from Department of Health, Department of Health equivalent in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and said, look, you need to move this forwards a lot faster. Also went for Public Health England, NHS Improvement. And it was really frustrating. Some of them just kind of played the, oh, well, we're doing some stuff. We're moving forwards. Like, well, that's not what I'm asking for you to do. I'm asking for you to abide by the national legislation of net zero.
Yeah.
Or even just abide by the 80% as it was at the time. The net zero hadn't quite come in. And it then stepped up another level with Doctors for Extinction Rebellion kind of gluing themselves to various different departments. And then there was a signature petition that went round of over 1,000 doctors saying, you need to move this, you need to do something. And it was pushed up the agenda quite quickly. And then the various different youth strikes have played into various different roles. But I found out on a conference call last week that it was actually one of the Doctors for Extinction Rebellion, who's quite good friends with the head of NHS England, who said, you need to do something about this. And at the end of February, the Greener NHS campaign was launched, requesting that anybody who has any ideas, any innovation, any case studies, any papers, any information on how we can green the NHS and get to a net zero.
Yeah.
And that's the key point. That's the first time that the NHS has actually acknowledged that we need to achieve the net zero.
Right.
Ideally, we need to achieve it earlier and faster than 2050. But it's like moving a super tanker. There's so many different working parts in the NHS that to do that is monumental.
Okay, what else was helping you move this super tanker forward?
At the same time, there was some guidance documents that got issued, some HTM, which is health technical memorandums, that got issued saying, look, this is what you need to do in order to achieve a net zero target. So the planning and operational guidance was issued, which is embedded in the NHS standard contract. So if you have anything that you do with the NHS, you must comply with this.
And can you give some examples of like what that guidance would be recommending, or like?
So that there is now an embedded element as part of those contracts that by April 2021, every NHS organisation needs to be in a renewable contract. They need to procure renewable electricity, and ideally, which is in short supply, a green gas network. As a planning guidance, it has not a very long page, but it's got a page that basically says any new builds or any buildings that you are retrofitting must be to a net zero standard. No specification as to what that is, but it means you need to be net zero. So that there's some real challenges on that front. But it's the first time that the NHS has kind of come up with this guidance and this push to get the NHS going green.
Okay.
And us within the sustainability world have welcomed it with open arms and said, right, we need to run with this. So there's some real challenges that we have, but there's a lot of stuff that we can resolve now.
Okay, and what's changing now?
I think that there's been an amazing thing that's coming out of this pandemic at the moment, is that we've always been we need to get to work, we need to drive to work, we need to be in the office, we need to have face-to-face conversations, we need to drive across the county, we need to do X, Y, Z. And in reality, what has come out of this is you don't need to do that. You can work at home, you can have a Skype conversation. The amount of people in my office who've never even logged into Skype or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, who've had a baptism of fire, is amazing. They say it takes 21 days to change a habit, and we're going to be on this lockdown. Those systems will be embedded into people's minds. And so I think the whole of the world, the whole of the country, and whole of the NHS will be dynamically changed by this. You've got GP surgeries, you've got hospitals that are having phone conversations, whereas historically they would have dragged patients in. They're having Skype calls with each other. Yeah. They're having a massive change in their system change that they've resisted. We're still the largest procurer of fax machines in the world in the NHS. We procure over 5,000 fax machines. You're probably too young to remember what a fax machine is.
Yeah, it's definitely at the tail end.
Well, I mean, they shouldn't really exist, but we still have fax machines that GPs will fax patients' notes into hospitals.
Yeah,
we have a system that is called a computer that you can not necessarily email, but you can pick up people's data according to their own NHS number. So that those systems are in place now. You don't physically need to touch something except for a key to send.
Yeah, and do you feel like there's particularly a pushback in the healthcare system? Because there's tons of things that have been moved electronically or could have been moved electronically like years ago, and that everyone's still kind of holding on to or ingrained in this way. And I feel from the outside that, like, particularly in the healthcare system, it's like a reluctance to adapt.
I think it's because everyone's so time constrained that learning new stuff is difficult. So they put it in the too difficult pile and don't want to do it. So it's a real system change very rapidly. And that's what we've needed.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. And that it could also, like you said, be an indication for future change as well, or openness to future change.
Well, the NHS is making a massive change as fast as the NHS can. The measures and the changes are starting to come. The thing is, I think we do need the public to pressure organisations. The Leeds Health and Climate Commitment, which is all of the health organisations around Leeds, have decided that they are going to, it's not quite a climate emergency, but will be targeting a carbon reduction dramatically by 2030. We are building first zero-emission ambulance, which will be hydrogen and electric. Yeah. And that should be on the road by the end of this year, fingers crossed.
Brilliant.
In Leeds, we're looking to plant 57,000 trees, one for every single NHS worker in Leeds. But we can't plant them on our land. So we need to plant them in our communities. We need to plant them everywhere else. But also we need to start planting more than 57,000 trees. The anaesthetists in West Yorkshire have a green anaesthesia group that's set up, and they are dramatically changing the landscape of anaesthetic gases. Because I'm not an anaesthetist. There are gastroenterologists, there are frontline A&E doctors. They're all changing the way that they function. I have paramedics who are changing the way that they drive, the way that they utilise things in the system. So there are some changes that are coming, and we will be making the impact. And there's only 6 sustainability leads in Leeds for all the health organisations. So, that's a very small number of people to try and convert 57,000 people to more sustainable lifestyle.
Yeah.
There's only 6 ambulance sustainability leads in the entire country for 22,000 of us. So we have a really big battle ahead of us, but we also need to bring everybody with us. So anybody who wants to get involved in sustainability, contact your sustainability lead and get involved, get engaged, and let's start making a change. The 1.5 million people that work for the NHS and the 1.5 million in the healthcare sector across the country, we all need to make the change, and we need to make it quickly. It's a real challenge.
Yeah, it is, but it sounds like you said we're starting, and that's really positive, and hopefully people will continue to make the change that needs to happen. So
absolutely,
we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Hey, so remember when we said we would come back to nitrous oxide? Well, for the rest of the episode, we'll be taking a practical look at how to reduce emissions from anesthetic gases through the eyes of an anaesthetist.
So a healthcare system in a country typically makes up 5% of the carbon footprint of a country. It's about 5% in the UK. In the Ireland, as I said, we don't know exactly what it is. Of that 5%, about 5% again is attributable to anaesthetic gases. That's how I got interested in it. I was shocked when I found this out, that my daily practice could be contributing such a significant chunk to the carbon emissions of my country. I started researching and figuring out how this was happening and why it wasn't being looked at further.
Yeah.
So that is low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, can you talk a bit more then about anaesthetic gases? We've heard already about nitrous oxide, and I know that in the hospitals you use other gases actually. And like, what are the impact that those have on the environment, and kind of what are the costs or challenges associated with alternatives? So
anaesthetic gases are divided up into the vapours that only anaesthetists use, and nitrous oxide, N2O, that's used by anaesthetists, but also used in obstetrics for women who are delivering their babies and can puff away in nitrous, and it's also used in the emergency department. So anaesthetic gases incorporates that whole group. About 80 or 90% of the carbon emissions of anaesthetic gases are due to nitrous.
Right.
And the other 10 to 20% are due to the anaesthetic vapours. The vapours are called desflurane and sevoflurane, isoflurane. So just to be able to visualise this a little bit better, an average citizen going about their daily life will emit about 25 kilograms of CO2 per day. An anaesthetist in their daily work will emit about 500 kilograms of CO2. Again, that could be hard to visualize. So what is 500 kilograms of CO2? It's a gas. How can you even weigh it? 500 kilograms of CO2 is about almost a tree worth of CO2. If you were to light a tree on fire, that would be about 500 kilograms of CO2 being left off into the atmosphere.
Okay.
This is the amount of CO2 that an anaesthetist could be emitting on a daily basis. If you were to stop or minimize the use of anaesthetic gases, you could reduce that by half or more.
Wow.
So if every anaesthetist did that everywhere for every day, you'd be saving substantial amounts of CO2 from being emitted.
Okay, is that a possibility? Because obviously the contexts or the examples you've given are essential. Like it's essential for people to have pain management in these circumstances. Yeah. So how does that work?
So I'll start with the anaesthetic vapours, because it's kind of an easy one. there are three vapors, as I said. One of them is called desflurane. Desflurane is about 2,500 times as potent as CO2 as a greenhouse gas. Or looked at it another way, a bottle of desflurane is again worth a whole tree worth of CO2.
Wow.
And just to give you to kind of put that in another context as well, I was looking at the amount of anaesthetic vapors that my hospital was using this year, and what I noticed was that in 2016 we were using about 6,000 bottles of sevoflurane.
Okay.
So sevoflurane is much less bad for the environment. It's about 100 times less bad for the environment than desflurane. So we used about 6,000 bottles of sevoflurane, and for some reason that year someone started using a little bit more desflurane. So with an extra 100 bottles of desflurane that year, we ended up doubling our carbon footprint from anaesthetic gases.
Wow.
And there's no real need. There's no need to use desflurane. Okay. You can do just as good an anaesthetic with sevoflurane as desflurane.
Okay.
So this is a behavioural change. It's an education thing. We just need people to know that desflurane is a terrible gas for the environment and needs to be gotten rid of. Gotten rid of or put away in case of some unknown situation where it might be necessary, but there's no real good reason for it, basically. However, that is not going to make a huge impact overall on the big picture. It's an important small step. It's low-hanging fruit, but big picture-wise, it's not going to make a huge impact. We still need to concentrate on where the 80-90% of emissions are coming from, and that's nitrous.
Right.
So it's a very potent greenhouse gas, and it's 300 times more potent than CO2. So that means it's insulating the earth 300 times more strongly than CO2. But it also breaks down the ozone layer. It gets up to that area. It gets up to that level in the atmosphere and breaks down the ozone layer, allowing more harmful light and heat in. And then the third thing is that it stays in the atmosphere for 100 years. So every time we use nitrous today, it's going to be around in the atmosphere, heating the planet for another 100 years. So nitrous is used in three situations. It's used in the emergency department, in anaesthetics, and in obstetrics. So in anaesthetics, it can be a helpful gas to add into an anaesthetic. In general, because it can reduce pain during a surgery, but there are alternatives that you can give medications intravenously that will reduce pain as well. It also has some dangers associated with it. You can't use it in certain types of surgeries due to some of the physical effects, like the way the gas expands in air-filled cavities. So it's not a fantastic anaesthetic gas in the first place.
Okay.
So there is it's another gas that there's no real need to use in anaesthetics. The one exception you could make is for its use in pediatric cases.
Okay.
So in pediatric cases, it can be helpful to speed up how fast you can get a child to sleep. And if you use it for only that, it would be a small amount of nitrous use. It would be a small area of use, and it's something that should be reduced as much as possible. But if we manage to get rid of nitrous out of everything except for that, we'd be doing extremely well. We'd have a massive reduction in the amount of nitrous used overall. There's no need to be continuously giving nitrous for a whole case. However, that is an opinion, and other anaesthetists will argue that they want to use nitrous all the time because they like it.
Why? Is it just something simple preference, or? It's
a preference. I haven't used it. I don't know when was the last time I used it. I used it briefly for a pediatric case recently, but outside of that, I haven't used it. Okay. I haven't used it for a whole case in years. There's no need.
Wow.
There's no need.
Okay.
There are always alternatives to nitrous, which is so that it's such a terrible greenhouse gas that you should always be thinking about what alternatives are available, and there are alternatives. People might ask if changing to kind of more sustainable anaesthetic techniques is safe.
Yeah, I was curious about it from a practitioner perspective. Like, is there a concern that it might reduce any of the quality of care or compromise the service?
Yeah, there's kind of a good reasonable anecdote about this. Just one of the ways of reducing the amount of anaesthetic gas they use in an anaesthetic is by switching to total intravenous anaesthetic, and that means no gas at all, and all of your anaesthetic is delivered by IV medications.
Right.
And that it requires a little bit of training, a little bit of education, and so not everybody might be fully confident in using total intravenous anaesthesia in Ireland. But things have gone so far the other direction in parts of the UK that anaesthetists aren't familiar with using gas. They're only familiar with using intravenous anaesthesia, and that's where we want to be headed. We want gas to be the old style, old-fashioned way of doing an anaesthetic, and we want people to be moving towards newer anaesthetics. So we do need to do that in a safe way, and it does require a little bit of education. And in the College of Anaesthesia in Ireland, we recently had our first environmental committee meeting.
Oh yeah.
So it's a huge development. It only happened like last week, and I think one significant feature of that committee is that all decisions made by the environmental committee go through the quality and safety committee to make doubly sure that all of the decisions are going to be safe from a patient point of view. Anaesthetists are already super cautious, careful people. We do all our kind of, just like pilots, we do all our kind of pre-flight checks, and we're constantly monitoring during an operation and after an operation, and we'll continue to do the same as we try to introduce more sustainable anaesthesia techniques. So hopefully that'll put people's worries to rest about whether more sustainable techniques are going to be safe.
Okay. Is there any kind of reluctance towards adapting reduction measures because it's potentially a change in practice? Or are people generally on board? Like, what is there an acceptance?
Yeah. So the things that are simple, like stopping using desflurane and just using sevoflurane, that's not going to cause any safety concerns with people. So that's just really an educational thing and a behavioural thing. We need to create an environment where that happens. With stopping nitrous use, again, nitrous is mainly, for the most part, a totally optional extra anaesthetic, and so removing that from common use, again, there won't be a safety issue, and I don't see anyone arguing that it's a safety issue outside of perhaps in paediatric anaesthesia.
Okay.
But going a step further and switching totally from gaseous anaesthesia to total intravenous anaesthesia, there will be a small learning curve, but that curve has already been jumped in the UK, and they are already implementing that kind of change. So it's very possible for us to do it too. Other techniques such as spinals and epidurals and other type of nerve blocks for surgeries, some of them are slightly more advanced techniques, and people will use them as they feel comfortable and confident in using them, but they are less important than just making sure that people stop using nitrous and desflurane, really. What needs to be done, and what is happening in the UK, is that people need to talk to each other. Anaesthetists need to talk to obstetricians and need to talk to emergency medicine physicians, and everybody needs to realise that nitrous is terrible gas for the environment, and to work together on alternatives.
Okay.
But what really will drive that is patients. I want patients to ask for a climate-friendly anaesthetic. I want patients to ask for a climate-friendly delivery of their baby. I want patients to ask for climate-friendly pain management in the emergency department.
Yeah.
It has to come from all quarters, or else nothing will happen.
And so part of that would be like patient awareness and education and things, because otherwise people probably don't even realise it.
Yeah, exactly. I want people to know. I want people to be angry, especially in Ireland where nothing's been done. I want people to be outraged that the HSE is ignoring their duty to patient care by emitting carbon dioxide and not even measuring it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a relatively easy problem to solve in terms of anesthetic gas use, that it is almost ridiculous we're not doing something about it.
It is, yeah. One of the reasons it's been left and its use has continued is that when the Montreal Protocol agreement and the Kyoto Protocol agreement came in, they thought that nitrous was a medical necessity, and they didn't put any regulations on its use. They didn't, even though it affects the ozone layer. It never got added to the list of of things that should be regulated. We know it's not a medical necessity in the strong sense of the word. It can be useful, but there are really good alternatives. We are not forced to use nitrous.
That's really interesting, because we've done actually an episode on the ozone layer and the Montreal Protocol, and what we were able to achieve as a result of it. But I never thought of it from this perspective before, in terms of why nitrous oxide wasn't on the list.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be added to any of those lists and regulated heavily. Right. So it really is up to education and public awareness of doctors, of everybody, doctors, patients, everybody involved in healthcare, awareness that nitrous is toxic for the environment, and you should limit its use or not use it at all. So just to put that in context again, would be that medical nitrous contributes to just 0.2% of Ireland's emissions. So just say that again, about 10% of Ireland's emissions would be from agricultural nitrous, and 0.2% of our emissions from medical nitrous. Okay. So why be worried about it? Yeah. Be worried about it because it's unregulated, first of all. Okay. And it's under our control, second of all. We can just turn it off with the flick of a switch.
Yeah. So it's something that we can change. Yeah. And again, lowhanging fruit. Based on the percentages that you gave me, in comparison to the agriculture sector, it's minimal. But as a whole, looking at the healthcare service, it's still quite substantial. So
very substantial. So you're talking about 4% of the healthcare service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's all relative. So it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I think a lot of it has to do with what we have in our control to do, because part of what people find so challenging about climate action is that it seems so distant and out of our control. Yeah. And the way that you've described this, it just feels like something super tangible that can be started today, like not even tomorrow. It's like you yourself have said you've changed your practice. Like you're trying to, make patients aware and make colleagues and peers aware of it too. Like it feels, why wait?
Yeah, absolutely. And this, you can get such good buy-in when you tell people, when you explain to people that they can make such a difference themselves in their daily practice. And once you have that buy-in, you need to use it, and you need to make people aware of all the other ways that they can contribute to decreasing carbon emissions and trying to protect the planet. Because as I'm sure you're aware, changing our practice with respect to anesthetic gases is not going to fix the problem. We have to bring sustainability into everything that we do every day, in hospital, outside hospital, wherever we are. grabbing people's attention with and showing them that they can make a difference themselves by changing their anaesthetic gas uses is both reduces the carbon emissions and it gets people excited about it. It's a real deliverable, measurable delivery.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all achievable.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds promising. That's good.
And hopefully with your podcast and with people around the country asking for more climate-friendly healthcare, then that'll push it even further.
Yeah, I really like what you said, because I don't think we think of it as a patient like power necessarily, but that it can be seen as the patient can actually ask for a certain type of care to be delivered. And I like that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it'll make a huge difference. If we start seeing patients coming into preoperative assessment clinic or into theatre asking can we have a more climate friendly, more stable anaesthetic, you may see some jaws drop in theatre, you may see some jaws drop in clinic, but suddenly it'll be discussed at the next meeting, and then suddenly people will be asking what is a climate friendly anaesthetic, and the information, the answer is out there. We have the answers, we just need people to be open to adapting their anaesthetic techniques to the new world, to a world that has more sustainable healthcare.
Yeah. And where in this pathway to becoming net zero is the HSE right now?
We aren't on the pathway. There is no pathway. There is one National Healthcare Sustainability Office made up of just 4 people, and the only thing they look at is energy use in hospitals.
Right.
And energy use in hospitals only makes up about 17, maybe up to 20% of the total carbon emissions of the healthcare service. So we are ignoring about 3/4 or more of the carbon emissions of the HSE. Whereas if you compare it with the NHS, you've been measuring your carbon footprint since 2013. There's been a nearly 20% decrease in carbon emissions compared to 2007. It's fantastic. It's completely different. It's as if we're not neighbours. It's as if we're not talking to each other. I don't know why things are so different.
Like Alexis was saying, like it's been a really slow kind of gradual process from someone inside it, like and you yourself like are obviously experiencing that. Do you feel like there's a momentum building?
Not quite yet. There's some small amount of work going on. Like there's a report released from the HSE about climate adaptation and how we adapt to climate change, but there's been nothing strong about how we try and prevent climate change. They've been totally ignoring one massive part of the issue. Climate adaptation is important. It is important to be able to look after elderly people in heat and try and look after infectious disease that are spread by floods and things like that. That is important, but no one is working on trying to reduce or mitigate how the HSE is having a negative effect on the environment and making climate change worse.
Yeah.
So I think where things differ a little bit in the UK, between the UK and Ireland, is on legislation to begin with.
Okay.
So the UK has the Climate Change Act from 2008, and every public and private body has been asked to measure their carbon emissions and to try and reduce them. And people have been doing it, and there's been some massive achievements, like I said, about the 20% reduction since compared to 2007. We don't have anything strong like that in Ireland. In the future, there is some hope coming from Europe. There's the European Green Deal coming in, and in a couple of years we may have binding targets to reduce our carbon emissions, similar ones to what you have in the UK. But at the moment there isn't anything. Another light at the end of the tunnel there is that there's politically the Green Party are in talks with the government at the moment, and there is some potential for a nationwide agreement to reduce our carbon emissions by 7% per per year, and that would be in line with the European Green Deal targets. But we haven't even started really. In reality, we haven't even gotten off the ground. This is all, as per usual, it's stuff that's down the line and maybe coming, and it's too late for maybes and possibilities. We have to start doing things now.
Yeah, I think that is still, even in the UK, like I think, maybe a few steps ahead, but it's still the kind of nitty-gritty enacting of them is still really tricky.
It is.
There's all kinds of frustrations on the ground for people that are actually in the services and trying to enact change. So.
Yeah, but it's the frustrating thing is that if we got off the ground, we could have these dramatic changes, these dramatic reductions in carbon emissions really quickly.
Yeah.
Because the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, is there, ready to be done. All we need to do is look over and copy you guys in the UK, and we will have dramatic changes in short order. There's such, and if you get that going, you get momentum. You could potentially make massive changes that are long-lasting, sustained. Hopefully there'll be more public awareness and awareness among doctors about this as an issue, and about how we can change and improve and reduce our carbon emissions dramatically on a daily basis. It's all about learning. It's all about education and getting people involved. So I also like to mention the Irish Doctors for the Environment. They're a great group of mainly medics in Ireland. We'd love everybody to join that group and start learning and start sharing information.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Bianca.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks for inviting me on.
You're welcome.
We hope you are every bit as inspired by this episode as we are. Listening to Alexis and Tim speak, it is evident that there are many challenges to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in health systems. But they both speak about an awareness and momentum that is building. We heard a few examples of achievable changes to reduce emissions that are already underway, and a call to join these efforts, because a systems change of this scale cannot happen alone.
Stay tuned for upcoming episodes and visit our website, theclimatepress.com.
This podcast is available on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, SoundCloud, Pocket Casts and Radio Public. Thank you to all the artists who contributed music to this episode. For more information, please see the website.
See you soon! And remember, make love, not CO2.